last night.
Been
man.
raining.
That's a lot of rain.
Can you do the invocation?
Most of it came. One and
Good
two-thirds.
with that. The Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer Commission meeting for Thursday, August 2nd, 2018 will come to order. Commissioner Copeland's going to do the invocation, and then I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance. You all please rise.
Father God, we thank you today for this time that we have together, and we just thank you for all of the blessings that you've placed on us, and for this wonderful opportunity for the commissioners and for the commission to work together for the benefit of the community. And that we just ask that you work with us today and that you guide our principles and our efforts, so that as we work together, that we do that in a good spirit, and that we do that in your name, and that we work for the benefit of all of those in our community. And we ask all these things in the precious name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have one for public comment?
Yes, sir. Miss Reva Reyna to discuss the sewer at Ellis Point.
Okay, Ms. Reyna, would you step forward, give us your name and your address? And if all of y'all are going to speak, then we need the same information from you all.
Back into the house or wherever. And I'm here to ask you to please see that we get some sewer, or we get some kind of help with the problem that we have with the rain. Now, I've been there 48 years, and last year, actually, when we had Hurricane Irma, it's the first time that water had ever come up into my yard. But it might not only come in my yard, it came over all of the state of Georgia, I thought. But we are in now need of some sewer. We looked at the map yesterday. Jimmy was gracious to talk with me yesterday, and we looked at the map. And we are sandwiched where Ellis Point is. We're sandwiched in. We have 303 on this side and 341 on this side. And we're right there in the middle, so you can come in and out of our neighborhood on either side. So I don't know how you're going to do it, which side you want to do it on, but please listen and give us some sewer. I don't want to say everything because I would like my neighbors to say something as well too. And I thank y'all for allowing me to come and speak to you, because I have spoken to several, and I look forward to Mr. Duncan to being on the commission as well. So I have my neighbor Gwen No and Larry Brayman that they want to speak as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Gwen No, and I have lived in Ellis Point for approximately 30 years. We do not have a homeowners association, but our neighborhood is very old. It's 66 years old. Everybody knows everybody. We do have a Facebook page that we keep in contact with each other and keep up with minute to minute of any problems or anything that anyone needs to know about. We are in desperate need of sewer. We would like to have water and sewer, but especially sewer. And with our area being such a low elevation, the cost to have a new system put in is quite expensive. I had gotten a petition signed years ago when Howard Lynn was the commissioner. He had asked me about getting a petition signed. I did. And he called me and said he needed it immediately at that particular time to turn into the commissioners and discuss it. Never heard anything back. Next thing I knew, Mr. Lynn had had it put in his subdivision. So we feel like that as old as the subdivision is, and as much taxes as we have paid, that it's our time to have a little bit of relief. And Mr. Brownling is familiar with our subdivision. He's been excellent about helping us with any problems that we've had, and we're very happy to have him as our commissioner. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. Larry Brayman, I live at 184 Anderson Drive. Anderson Estates, actually, it's next to Ellis Point. And we've got some real problems with our drainage, that we can't get rid of the water fast enough. The way it goes right now, it creates a bulkhead in front of my house, and it backs the water up on Anderson Drive all the way to Shore Drive. And it comes actually out of the sewers, out of the sewer drains. It's supposed to be going that way, and it's coming up and going that way. And it actually floods out in this Arnett's yard and house almost every time. It's just on a normal rain. Lately it's been real bad, so we need some help. If you can help us and do what you can for us. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make?
Yeah,
a
I was
comment? Staff met with Ms. Renee yesterday, and as luck would have it, we are looking at changes to the system. We've got a current project that's being evaluated, that's going forward out at what's the Friendly Express there across from Parker's next to the pumpkin patch. They're going to be, it looks like, negotiating to get sewer and water across right there, and we believe that we'll be able to sanitary sewer across right there, and we believe that it will be a short run to reach to the neighborhoods from there. We've talked about what we could do, and I think we need to do a little more evaluation, but I think there is a conceivable way to get sanitary sewer at a fairly reasonable price to the community. I know Ms. Rigger was going to talk to the other neighbors and see what level of interest. Kind of duplicate what you did, Ms. Lynn, to get signatures of interest.
Certainly.
But if we get enough signatures, we'll be able to see what kind of level of resources we'll have accumulated. And I will say this now, that the last comment I'll make real quick, we're going to keep this in mind and push it hard to try to make it happen with your help. The storm sewage, the storm drains, the storm sewers, for drainage, that's not part of us. We don't do that. That would probably be Dave Austin
County.
at the county.
Yeah, in fact, I want to address that since he brought it up here.
Yeah.
Jimmy's is exactly right. The storm drain is not something that this body takes care of. As you know, we have looked at that flooding out there quite a bit. I don't know if you're aware, but Ms. Snow has told us that she thinks she can get us an easement on that community property that you all have down on, I guess it's either north or west of Joy Arnett. You mentioned Joy's house. And if we can get an easement to cut a ditch that way, yes, Ms. Snow?
We actually own the easement, the Ellis Point. I've done a lot of research on it, collected taxes way back, know everything on it. The easement is left for the residents of Ellis Point, so we already have an easement there.
Yeah, but we don't. The county doesn't though. And so we got to work that out. Whoever since you don't have an HOA, but I talked with Joy and Joy talked with you, and so if we can get an agreement, and then we're going to go back the other way from Joy's house, not toward you, Mr. Brayman, but back the other way, and that's where that water needs to go. And I think we can solve it. I mean that's the way it's got to go. So if we can just all work together on it and make our county attorney happy with some kind of an agreement, I think we're gonna get it done fairly quickly. So.
Jimmy, anything further?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. We'll go to the first agenda item, which is the approval of minutes from the July 19th meeting, regular meeting. And I'm passing out the executive session minutes, which would be the second item on the agenda. So as soon as you're comfortable with the minutes, one of the things that the staff has done is reduce the amount of the verbiage of the minutes to more just the essence of what was discussed and what was approved, or if something was approved. We have videotape backup of all our meetings, so if we want to go back through and really figure out what the full discussion was, that's available to us.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes from the July 19, 2018 regular meeting.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Minutes are approved.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve of the executive session minutes of Thursday, July 19th, 2018.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, and we can pass the executive minutes over. Okay, the next item is Mr. Domerty on Bergenwood's proposal.
Thank you, Chairman. You have before you a memo related to Bergen Woods and the comprehensive agreement that is included in your package. It is not July 2nd, it is August 2nd. I apologize for the date. I have not flipped my calendar yet. As you know, the White Development Group is seeking approval for the development of a 252-unit apartment complex called Bergen Woods at 5970 Golden Isles Parkway. Preliminary plat has been filed along with the zoning request, and both are awaiting approval. Currently, there is insufficient sewer capacity to serve the proposed development without additional improvements to the sewer infrastructure. Lift stations 4105 and 4107 are existing JWSC pump stations located in the north portion of Glynn County. The JWSC master plan contemplates the installation of additional 15 horsepower triplex pumps and a force main upgrade to increase capacity within those basins. The entire project is projected as of 2016 to cost in excess of $1.5 million. However, the installation of pumps and additional lift station upgrades are roughly estimated to be around $200,000. The estimated capital improvement fees that would be due from Bergen Woods is estimated to be approximately $220,000, depending on how they structure their development. The developer submitted a unsolicited proposal on May 2nd, 2018 to address the capacity shortages to support the project. That unsolicited proposal was adopted by the JWSC, and thereafter the JWSC and the developer confirmed that lift station 4107 pumps have sufficient capacity already to serve the development, but that the 4105 pump must be upgraded. The force main must also be upgraded simultaneously to account for the development's needs. The developer now proposes to fund and contract for necessary improvements to the sewer infrastructure in order to provide the capacity for the development. JWSC staff has determined that the proposed project is feasible and reasonable, and I and the developer's attorney have come to terms on a comprehensive agreement that is included with your package, wherein the developer will either pay for the project or portions thereof and allow JWSC to bid and manage the project, or allow the JWSC to bid the project and then the developer will manage the project themselves. In exchange, the utility will either reimburse the developer through applying an equivalent amount of credit toward future capital improvement fees that would otherwise be due upon the development of the property, or simply allow the developer to pay for the project or a portion thereof. The JWSC also has discussed whether they would like to upgrade lift station 4107 regardless and upsize the force main from a 4-inch to a 6-inch or 8-inch at its own expense.
Okay.
Any questions?
The upgrade by JWSC, where's that money gonna come from?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Turns did ask a question about this as well, and this is clarified in the engineering documents attached as to what force main they're referring to. So address something about force main first. Force main is actually the force main above 105 and above 107 they gotta tie into, it's on the spur. So that's the force main we're talking about. They're proposing to install 4-inch. We may either use a little bit more of their capital improvement funds that are gonna come in with this project to go from a 4 to a 6 or an 8, that's gonna be evaluated. May wanna go ahead and get some additional capacity on the spur section there. In reference to 4107, a pump upgrade there, that would either come out of the additional, the difference of funds that would be left in their capital fees, or we may potentially approach the board for utilizing capital improvement funds to facilitate that. So what they're presenting is what they need, and that's per our policy. They present a proposal to upgrade to their needs, our system to their needs. If there's anything above that we want to incorporate, it may make sense while they're either installing a force main, doing a pump upgrade, something like that. Let's go to the next bigger horsepower, what it may be. We can add a little bit of money in there with the board's approval to do that. So.
But the motion doesn't have anything to do with, what Bergen Woods needs. Bergen Woods only needs to upgrade from 4105.
I'm sorry, there's a comma missing. The first part of the motion says, move to approve the comprehensive agreement with Dwight Development Group as is, comma, or to make any revisions to allow JWSC to upgrade 4107 and further upsize the force main as the staff deems appropriate.
Okay.
So the comprehensive agreement only deals with 4105 and the force main.
Okay.
I don't understand why we would look at 4107.
Why are we looking at
Why are we looking at
4107?
Commissioners,
No,
in the engineering document, there's also a site map that may help. It shows the Bergen Woods location, project location. It shows a section of heavy dash line that's labeled approximately 2650 linear feet of force main. It'll be upgraded from 2-inch to 4-inch. That's the force main that's referenced in the memo, in Charlie's memo. And then below that, you'll see 4107 and then 4105. They're in it's a sequential flow from 107 to 105.
So, okay, so what you're telling me is that Bergen Wood is gonna do the increase line that's in black?
Correct.
That's correct. And then they're gonna do the increase that's required for 4105?
4105 only. That's
Okay, but we're talking about increasing 4107, which is intermediate between the two.
correct.
And I guess the question I have is, why are we upgrading 4107 and on our cost when it appears the whole line needs to be upgraded down to 4105?
4107 currently has sufficient capacity for their needs.
Okay, so, go ahead.
That appears to be a future expense, not something we can do now.
It could be, correct.
So I'm wondering why it's even in the motion.
Well, we wanted to discuss it with the commission because there may be some additional developments that come in north of Bergen Woods that would then require upgrades of 4107. So the thought was to go ahead and do it now if the commission wanted to do that. It's just an option.
Well, isn't there an option on the table that we delay it for a while and
Absolutely.
potentially have another unsolicited proposal by
Absolutely.
a developer to come in and do that?
Absolutely. The
And
comprehensive
that would
agreement.
save us some of our capital improvement fees?
The comprehensive agreement as drafted only deals with what is needed for Bergen Woods.
Okay, I think it'd be better to keep this thing separate.
With regard to 4107. And the
think
force
that's right.
main, the force main in the comprehensive agreement is only going from a 2-inch to a 4-inch.
Yeah,
Is there, and there was a thought that we may want to go ahead and pay the difference for a 6-inch or an 8-inch.
I understand that position, but
Okay?
I guess I don't have a compelling reason to do it if we're short of funds.
So in layman's terms, how much is the cost of the stuff that's gonna directly affect them? Our cost to provide them service? Just round numbers.
Their engineer's estimate's around 200,000,
Around 200,000 just for the 2,650 feet of force main,
plus the
2 pumps and
105.
panels at one.
plus the 2 pumps, 200,000. And how much of that are they planning to pay for?
All of
Okay.
it.
The 2-inch, what size force main is it right now? It's 2-inch? And where's it come from?
Safety complex.
Yeah, safety complex, and comes down to safety complex and turns toward 4105.
It comes from Brunswick-Glynn Woods there, where we're replacing it, so it goes back upstream from there some?
Just a little bit, yes, sir.
And then it comes, and where's it discharge? Right where we're gonna increase it to 4-inch? So there'll still be some 2-inch force main up above Bergen Woods.
Correct, correct. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Glynn County's actually doing some improvements there at the safety complex, with animal control shelter and things like that. We're working with them right now with their pump station needs. And that
Is that a private pump station?
is joint water and sewer operated and maintained pump station there. There are some needs there, which would likely include force main upgrade from their point down to the point where Bergen Woods
Is
is
that a
gonna be.
grinder pump?
It is currently. It was put in to be temporary, and I think we've gotten all the goodie out of that one that we can, with all the things that have been built up out there.
Well, I'd rather revise the proposal and have them evaluate that 2-inch force main all the way, if we can do that.
Okay.
That could be another project other than Bergen Woods.
Could be.
So when you convert from 2 to 4, is there any additional capacity, or is that just meeting their needs?
2 to 4 is pretty much meeting their needs.
So another couple of houses, and we gotta go from 4 to 6.
More than that, yeah, the fluid velocity go up to about 5. You don't wanna go much more than that. Typically, you're around 3 or so. That's why we would recommend upsizing. It wouldn't be much money to upsize.
That's what I was gonna ask, what's the incremental cost for the upsize from, I mean, if you're doing it anyhow, you're doing the board and you're doing this, I mean, what's the difference in 6-inch pipe versus 4-inch pipe?
You're probably looking at $20 a foot, something like that. You could do the.
Extra.
Yes, yes. And it would just simply be material cost.
So
So
the
50
line
grand-ish.
would, the line may have to be increased, or could be increased at a relatively reasonable cost. But the upgrades to 4107, that's gonna get expensive for us, correct?
Yes. 'Cause you
Okay,
have pumps.
the question I have is, can 4107 handle a larger line
Yes. Yes,
without any upgrade?
yes. And 4107, the unique thing about it is a very short force main. I think it's only 1,000 feet or something like that. It's very short. So either a parallel or a upsized force main at that point would increase the capacity of 107.
I think we just need to change the motion from a 2-inch to a 4-inch or 6-inch, and lay that on the developer. There's not gonna be any increased cost for them hardly anyway.
Okay, so are we saying that we're not gonna do upgrades to 4107 at this time? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's not
Well, yeah,
needed.
I think we're talking about, if they come back again, another, developer come back, they may be able to do that for
Yeah.
us.
That's
Because
correct.
they will be requiring that.
That's what I'm thinking. You would already
You
have a
and her.
6-inch line in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's wicker the motion the way it needs to read.
I'm trying to read it like I hereby move that JWSC approve the comprehensive agreement with Detroit Development Group to, increase the capacity of 4105, and increase the upstream force main from 2-inch to 4-inch or 6-inch.
Okay.
Without a motion?
That's,
There's a motion.
The motion.
I second.
You want me to say it again?
I think so.
I hereby move that the JWSC approve the comprehensive agreement with the Dwight Development Group to increase the capacity of pump station 4105 and upsize the upstream force main from 2-inch to either 4-inch or 6-inch, as determined by the staff.
I second that.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion?
Now, does the comprehensive agreement have any verbiage about 2-inch, 4-inch, or 6-inch? Or does it just specify the length?
It references the engineering report, and it references the engineering report.
Okay. Understand, they're gonna pay for 4-inch,
Right.
and we're gonna pay for an additional 2-inch. That's
Unless we
what
can
we're
get the
saying.
unless we can get the 6-inch under their capital improvement fees, because they're gonna pay that anyway, if it comes back under. If they're gonna pay $220,000, and we bid out, and the 4-inch is $150,000, and we can get the 6-inch for $200,000, we can put that as an additive alternate. And if their fees will pay it, they're gonna pay the same amount of fees either way.
Okay.
So, they could end up putting a 6-inch force main, and it just depends on what the prices come back.
But the taps we're giving them, they're only for that property.
Yes.
They can't apply those taps to other work in Glynn County.
Well, pursuant to JWSC policy, they are transferable within the basin.
Within the basin,
Yes.
which is 4107.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the motion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item is a change to the personnel policies to reflect the Georgia law on handheld electronic devices.
Yes, sir. You have before you a memo related to the amendment of the personnel policies for JWSC to comply with the hands-free law that was recently passed as of July 1st. The Hands-Free Georgia Act has come into effect. The recent legislation made significant changes to the use of electronic devices by drivers. In essence, drivers in Georgia are no longer able to hold electronic devices and must use hands-free technology such as phone mounts or Bluetooth. In an effort to ensure JWSC employees are complying with this change in Georgia law, the JWSC would benefit from the implementing changes to its employee policy. The changes below will reflect the current JWSC policy of requiring that employees safely pull over before using mobile devices. Two exceptions to the general rule are built into the policy. Employees, number one, employees who are driving may call emergency services in response to an immediate threat or emergency. And number two, in the event of a utility emergency, employees may use their phones while driving if required to respond to said emergency. The two exceptions are explicitly allowed under the new law. However, they may only be exercised if it is safe to do so. There are 3 separate policies requiring changes to reflect the current law. The Code of Conduct policy, the use of communication systems and equipment devices, and number 3, use of motor vehicles. And just for your information, the staff at the safety stand-down day was already educated with regard to the new law, so they're familiar with it. We're just bringing the policies. The policies didn't conflict with the law, but we're amending the policies to make it explicitly compliant with the law.
Did you want to have a work session to discuss this further? Or?
No, sir. No, I've got educated enough about it, so I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, is this a 24/7 kind of a situation, or is it just during company hours? I understand the hands-free law is 24/7, but is this,
Right.
this policy, is it, if an employee takes the cell phone home and has the use of that 24/7, does this policy apply then?
The
Let's say
policy,
the employee is stopped and receives a citation at
Use his
9
personal
o'clock at
vehicle.
night.
Yeah, use his personal vehicle.
Right.
driving their own personal vehicle.
No, it's only when they're acting within the scope of their employment do the personnel policies in this situation apply.
Well, you're in the scope of your duties when you first leave home to come to work. It's not when you actually get to
Maybe.
work.
Maybe. It depends. There's a lot. It does.
If the employee, I'm just gonna go a little bit further with a devil's advocate kind of concept, or if the employee at 9 o'clock at night is using the cell phone, has an accident, hits another car, the cell phone is ours, been assigned to the employee, and there's a fatality. Is there the ability then for the survivors on the other side or their families to come back on us because we issued the cell phone to that employee?
I've never seen that theory put forth, but I'm sure
I mean, it's a new
plaintiff's
law.
attorney- Right. Well, the plaintiff's, it's a unique theory, but still the employee is not active within the scope of their employment, and the communication devices policy by the JWSC explicitly states, I believe, that the company-issued phones are only to be used during business hours and for business purposes.
Oh, it does?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but if you're responding to an emergency,
Then you're acting within the scope of your employment.
that's
Yes,
right,
sir,
and you're in
we
your
would
own
be liable.
personal vehicle.
Yes, sir. But if it's an emergency, the hands-free law does not apply. Or there's an exception that allows the utility worker in an emergency situation to grab his phone.
Let me kind
So
of
the
weigh
proof of
in.
making
Many years ago, I worked for a company, and another employee had a company-furnished pickup truck. I can't speak to what the policy was about the pickup trucks, but I do know that after hours on his own time, he ride around a pickup truck, got involved in an accident, the company got sued. Because he was in a company pickup truck. That's pretty much what done it.
Yes, sir. And if you're driving a company vehicle, I would expect the JWSC to get sued, but that doesn't mean we're liable.
Well, I'm concerned that if they're on a company phone in their own vehicle though, especially with this law in place, even if we have a policy that they, I don't know what you do about that, but if they have a company phone.
Well, in that situation, if they're driving their personal vehicle, the personal vehicle has its own insurance, and therefore, if the JWSC is sued, our insurance company can seek subrogation against their insurance company. Of course, that would put us in the position of suing our own employee, but
Sue the ones with the money.
But the purpose of these policy revisions are so that if a employee does get in a wreck while using a hands-free device, or excuse me, while not using a hands-free, while holding a telephone, how about that? The JWSC would have a strong argument that they have trained their personnel and that they have policies in place, and therefore we couldn't be liable for punitive damages and so forth.
We'll have one question then. If to affirm, for each individual that may be in a truck or
sign something.
have a cell phone or both, do they have to sign something after this policy? Is this policy gone over with them? And do they sign something that they had this policy explained to them?
The policy, I assume, will be, we will educate the employees the way we educate them anytime policies are changed. I'm not sure if that requires a signature, but they, again, like I mentioned, they have already been educated at the safety stand-down day, and we have a sign-in list for that.
Well, okay,
When an employee is first hired, they do sign off that they received the handbook. And as changes are made, we don't get a second sign off. But, the training that was, done by the safety stand down, they're very thorough, distracted driving tips and procedures.
Did they sign in for the safety training? Okay, so that right there, that's covers it.
And if want to, we can always schedule to go over it if the policies get approved just one more time, post it on the bulletin boards and go over with them again. I mean, it's not a big deal.
And during the staff meetings, we routinely have a policy that is handed out to the division heads, and they are to review it with their subordinates.
Do any of the JWSC vehicles have Bluetooth technology? And this would apply even if they have Bluetooth technology then?
You can use Bluetooth technology or a phone mount. You just simply cannot.
I know that, but this is a requirement to pull over. It don't say unless they use Bluetooth technology. This is the way I read it.
Except in emergency, yes.
Except in
That's what it
emergency.
says. That's what it says.
So if they have Bluetooth technology, they can't use that either unless they pull over, according to the,
Well, wireless telecommunications device is defined within the statute. We'd certainly revise that to
well, we
spell it out
need
that
to
you
be
can-
clear if it's Bluetooth, whether we're gonna allow it or not.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's some distraction too, a little bit.
Mhm. But yes, sir, the wireless telecommunications devices does not, that definition does not include Bluetooth.
Well, I think we're gonna have to, it will have to be somebody who get, some case law that really established this, what you can and can't do. Basically, you know, we're all over the place as to what you can and should not do, but someone's gonna get in trouble, not us, I'm talking about.
Hopefully.
Oh, no.
Someone statewide.
So someone statewide, it's gonna happen, and then we'll be looking at what the judgment came, about that, I'm sure.
Right, the courts will now begin interpreting
Trying to
the
interpret it, yeah, exactly what's up.
statutes. Yes, sir.
Right.
So this provision should, following up, this provision should incorporate Bluetooth technology, some verbiage about that.
And
if it's permitted or not, because apparently under
Right.
the law, it is permitted.
It is, that's right.
Within the law.
Yes, sir, and it is, the way I read it, it is implicitly allowed in this policy as well. But we can make it more explicit.
So do you feel like training, the training we have, the signatures involved, that adequately insulates the commission from liability in that in an accident?
From punitive liability, yes, sir. For not educating our employees, things like that. Now, certainly, if an employee violates this policy, holds a phone, has a wreck, that employee would be liable, and therefore the JWSC would be vicariously liable for that employee. So it doesn't insulate us from any liability, it just insulates us from punitive liability for failing to educate our staff or have a policy in place.
And is that the same thing for outside of company hours? Or do we need a hold harmless that the employee signs when he
No, sir.
receives the phone?
No, sir. If it's outside, if they are not acting within the scope of their employment and the JWSC is still sued, then we would simply go through discovery, file a motion for summary judgment saying he was not acting within the scope of his employment, and we would be dismissed from the case.
Maybe.
Well, and practically speaking, if the employee testifies that he's not acting within the scope of his employment, then the plaintiff's attorney would likely let us out anyway. And his insurance would still be, his personal insurance would be the one that would be covering the damages and the defense costs, and not JWSC's insurance.
Okay.
The insurance company may turn around and then file a countersuit against us to recover the loss they did have to pay out. I mean, who knows where this thing is gonna go? And of course, the case law hasn't been, it's
That's
not
right.
out there yet.
That's right.
We'll have to wait for that.
Well, there's There's principles in place, though, that would prevent JWSC from being liable for someone acting outside the scope of their employment. Even if it's
I'm fearful that we cannot cover all the potential bases that are out there. Are we sufficiently agreement that to pass this and let it get into the personnel policy, while at the same time directing the staff to come up with better verbiage to cover some of the things we've discussed today? Is that?
I think so, but as you say, I don't think we can ever cover all the bases of it. The Bluetooth technology needs to be put in there, I think, somehow. But it is what it is, and the law states that we got to have this. So this does cover us, give us some type of coverage from being liable. It puts a lot of responsibility on our employees to adhere to our policies, basically. That's what it does.
Okay. Well, if we're all, kind of in that same area, I am, then if we can have a motion and a second, then we'll vote on it.
Okay, I make a motion that hereby move that JWSC amend the following policy to reflect the changes in the amended tax exhibits, Code of Conduct Exhibit 1, Guideline 3.Q, the use of communication system equipment devices, Exhibit 2, Guideline 220, and 3, use of motor vehicle, Exhibit 3, Guideline 9.0 to P. And also place in there something about the Bluetooth technology. Yes, sir.
A second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Have Ms. Crosby talk to us about warehouse and inventory management improvement project.
Good afternoon. I came to meet with you guys today and discuss a warehouse and inventory management improvement project that the staff has put together. At the top of the memo, you'll see some quick facts about the project. We're looking to do building improvements to the 2 warehousing facilities, plus purchase bar scanning software, hardware, and the programming to get that implemented, and also look at rolling stock on some of our trucks, just the fixtures that would warehouse that if we want to move to that next step, and maybe a little more programming to cover the implementation or the API setup between our financial software and our CityWorks software. So there's a lot of details here, and we'll talk through it, and please feel free to interrupt me at any point with questions. A couple of things that have been going on with our warehouses, just to give you background what you do or don't know about our inventory management and warehouses. We actually have 2 physical locations. One of those is down at Academy Creek, and that's where there is support for systems pumping and maintenance, wastewater treatment, water production, and did I forget someone? Facilities, yeah, technically. They kind of have their own thing back here, but they don't really do much inventory. And then North Harrington, that is primarily the water distribution warehouse with a couple of pumps that water production has on their site. So both inventories right now are tracked basically for materials issue using paper tickets that are then keyed into a couple of different technology platforms. For the Academy Creek site, which is the larger inventory. They're at about $1.13 million in inventory value. We handle transactions using different methods through Excel spreadsheets. We place orders and enterprise our financials. We do disbursements through CityWorks, and then we go back to an Excel spreadsheet, calculate everything we've done with the issues, and give that back to finance to actually post the journal transactions. So the same thing is going on with water distribution, except they have not actually loaded their inventory into CityWorks, so there's no data entry in City Works right now. But that's one of the goals with that warehouse, is that they will also bring their inventory into City Works. So right now, they're just using an Excel spreadsheet and Enterprise. So they purchase through Enterprise, receive the materials to get the bills paid for it, but the actual tracking and issuing of parts is happening on Excel spreadsheet. That comes in an Excel spreadsheet to be posted into Enterprise. So you've got our financial system, our asset management system, and Excel spreadsheets. So that's 2 to 3 places that data entry is occurring for materials transaction. So don't want to beat you over the head with that, but a lot of data entry is going on. So one of the things that we're thinking about with this, with all the duplication in those data entry efforts, it leaves us open, and we've actually found some instances in the past 60 days, so since I've become involved in inventory management, where we've had errors in our data entry, omissions in our data entry, and so all those multiple steps through the process, the data from the inputs not getting to the output. And ultimately what that does is it consumes a lot of staff time with the data entry. Also, it affects the quality of the reporting that we're getting out of either asset management or financials. And eventually it'll show up on the bottom line with our understanding of basically where we are from a financial perspective of the inventory. And then anytime you have to spend time backtracking where you got off, that's extra staff time that they could be doing other things. So in the memo, you'll see there's a couple of areas that we've identified for improvement on inventory management. So a couple of those are actual related to the facilities themselves. Academy Creek in particular needs a decent amount of work to really physically secure and protect the inventory from damage or potential loss. There's a separate sheet, if you look about 3 back, looks like an Excel spreadsheet. These are actually the details of the project plan. And so as identify some of the deficiencies that we found in our inventory management or in the warehouse facilities themselves, you'll see where we're addressing those in the elements of the project itself. So for example, the very first item on that list is a roof repair to the warehouse area of the Academy Creek building. So this isn't the wastewater treatment itself, this is just the warehouse location. And we've received some estimates on that, and it's going to be about $6 grand to do some patches to keep water from coming in, because we've actually had a couple of instances where some inventory's been damaged and we've had to write it off because it got wet under a significant storm. So that's one of the items. Also, if you've toured that facility, there is actually a basement at Academy Creek down underneath the existing inventory area, and currently we store pumps in there for our lift stations, and there has been an incident a couple of years ago where that flooded. So our idea is to take all of those pumps from the basement. There's an unused storage area. I think at one time it had been used for pump storage. Do some work on the floor in there. There's some concrete repair that needs to happen, and turn that into the new pump storage area. And that'll give us a couple of things, a more resilient location for those pumps, and also maybe help us from a safety perspective, because we're not having to move things down in the basement and up into the basement. So it'll make the delivery more efficient, and also once we actually issue those out in the field, more efficient. So that's the floor. And then one more facility thing that needs to happen there is the bays. Currently, not all of the bays are locked and secured. They're open, so people can come and go through parts of them. So we want to install gate doors and kind of lock those down and make them more secure. And then we're going to put a sealant on that floor. If you've ever walked in there, if you stomp your foot pretty hard, dust comes up and it gets in the parts and makes things not as clean as they should be. So we want to put a basic sealant there. It's probably not going to be very expensive to do that. And then also, 2 of the bays don't have shelves currently, and so things are on pallets or just stacked in boxes, and some of the things are the appropriate size that they actually could be maintained on shelves. So we'd like to order shelves to actually put those in a more organized fashion in there. And then with that, we're going to reconfigure the actual counter with which we issue materials in and out of the warehouse. And we'll actually have a dedicated terminal there that we'll be using to issue parts. Right now, That's one of the reasons people are writing it on paper. They're writing it down, and then they're going back to where their workstation is and keying things in. Thought somebody had a question, sorry.
Question, who's in charge of inventory management?
That would be me now, yes.
Okay. And you asking for a capital, what's called improvement project to do these things?
Yes,
We didn't give you the money to, since you was in charge of this, we didn't give you the funds to appropriately do your job?
like I said, I've just taken over this role recently, and so we've been spending the past couple of months looking at what we're doing and what we could do to maybe improve things, and so this is the money that we think it's going to take. I think we had talked that this will come from an R&R fund that we have, our reserve fund. So it's not in an operating budget, it's gonna come out of R&R because it's actually fixing the building and doing some things of that nature, and there'll also be a software purchase that's involved.
Yeah, but we gave you responsibility, but no funding for it. That's what it seems like.
This is what we're doing now.
That's not the case.
This initiative took place after the budget was pretty much in place for this year, so this is a bit of an unexpected expenditure.
Part of the process is to get a manager in there to examine what the needs were, to examine what the money and funds are, and that's really where we're at today. Pam's done a heck of a job going in and evaluating what we do and don't have, what the problems were and aren't. And she's evaluated what the things are that we need to be able to facilitate better management of inventories. So at this point, the list is ready for us to fund.
I think,
Also, Commissioner, even though there is some upfront money required to get this in place, the savings that can be recognized over the next few months will probably offset the cost of getting this implemented, because we'll be ordering correct quantities, not over-ordering, not under-ordering, hopefully minimizing our order costs and our holding costs on inventory, and should recoup this relatively quickly.
well, to that point, I'm sorry.
I was slow getting there, but I was getting to that point.
Well, to that point, I mean, that kind of builds off what I was just thinking anyhow. I mean, I think a lot of what you said makes sense. I think it all made sense in theory. I just wonder if, the actual software and the upgrade there should be a capital expenditure, and the rest of this should just come as small projects directly out of the operating budget. And you're talking about, you're gonna save it in the first 3 to 4 months from your operating budget. Isn't that what you said? First couple of months?
No.
I didn't intend to state a specific time period, but I would assume within the fiscal year.
So within the fiscal year, we'll have an operational savings that equals our expenditure. So why not just spend this in operations, except for the software costs? I mean, most of these are things, frankly, we probably should be doing anyhow. Our roof leaks, we should be repairing. That is $6,000. That's more of a, operationally just fix the roof, and you're gonna save that money in your inventory management over the course of the year anyhow. So pull that out of operation expenses versus,
That's what I thought too,
capital.
because I thought that since we started this inventory management thing, we gave her the responsibility, we should have provided that for her in her operational budget to do those things, so she'd be able to do those things, get things straightened out. But the software, I see the software as being something, as a capital project, because it's something that we don't have, it's something we really would need anyhow. So that's the reason why I asked you that question.
Yeah, and if you kind of add it up, the costs are about 50-50, what we're gonna do to facilities and what we're gonna do with the barcode. The barcode's a little bit more expensive. It's probably maybe 55% of everything we're looking at. But as we got to looking at all the little tweaks that need to happen to the buildings to kind of optimize it, it seemed like it was enough to put this all together as one package.
I just think we should, try to spend what we can in operations as efficiently
And
possible.
I don't have
If we're gonna save in
operations budget.
operations, why not take it
Who has the
from?
money for this facility before you had it?
Systems pumping.
Who?
Systems
and Pumping.
Take it out of
So
that.
they should
Take it out of that.
have money available to provide her. And I think what you really need to do is, like we did when we moved customer service, is give her a budget based on taking money, because they no longer have that responsibility.
True.
And building it that way. And I think my concern is, it seems like every time we get involved with the software project, the initial cost is not anywhere near what the final cost turns out to be, because of how the software companies work it. But
I will say on the CityWorks side of this software package, the barcode readers that are being presented here, they already have a defined API for these barcode readers. That's why we selected these readers.
Right.
Because they don't automatically, there has to be some work. They've already done the work to make these
Okay,
things talk.
and how much is that whole portion gonna cost?
This, it's gonna be between 55 and 60,000 of the total that we're looking here.
Don't we have capital, funds available to pay for that?
We do. It's just, you all have to approve us to
Okay,
spend the
so-
money on
So that should
projects.
come, and if we approve it, then that money would pay for that.
We would identify the money for that project.
So the operational stuff should come from the operating budgets that are losing that responsibility.
I
Okay?
agree.
And then the capital funds should be used to pay for the software of new equipment and new equipment required for that software to function properly.
Speaking for Kirk, if we have to take the operational money out of his budget, I can make it work for him.
All right.
He might not be happy about it, but I can make it work.
Well, and to Mr. Donahue's point, we're going to get it back in the first,
Right,
at the end of the
exactly.
fiscal year anyhow from operations. So,
Is this warehouse location, is it the old DAF building? Is that where it is?
Yes.
So now, there's other plans for using that building too, aren't there? That is this gonna impact those future plans?
No, and we think that this right here is really just enough to get that warehouse working in order. If we go into the list, there's some organizational issues in that space right now, and we're actually having trouble determining, what the inventory is and how to effectively count it and maintain it because of the state of the building. So whatever money we're putting here, I think that we've got to have that in the short term till something big happens down there. And as far as I understand, nothing big is happening anytime
So
soon.
you've done a inventory of our equipment? Yes, no, have not.
We are working toward getting that organized. We do cycle counts as the way that we've always done inventory, but once we get all this, one of the plans in this fiscal year is to have a, hard physical inventory.
So have you discovered any discrepancies,
Yes,
major discrepancies?
yes.
major to the tune of what? I mean,
Well,
round numbers.
I will say this, particularly down in the pump room, because it is in an area right now that's not under control and under supervision of a storeroom attendant all times. And at times, things come out of there after hours. There were a few pumps that were missing when we went to do the physical inventory that alerted us that we needed to look a little harder with how we're identifying things, labeling things. The other thing, too, I didn't get all the way into everything I wanted to say. Just last year, that inventory at that location was actually loaded into CityWorks, and so there's some issues with the data that got loaded. And so one of the things we're looking at is the quality of what we have there to identify what's in inventory. So there's quite a few things to sort out. I'm not trying to paint a picture of gloom and doom, but we have noticed, pumps are pretty pricey, and if 2 or 3 aren't transacted, it adds up really quick.
So when you say missing, you mean installed somewhere and never,
Right.
never accounted for?
Right.
Not
And
stolen?
actually, we actually had a few that were in the pump station that had been paid for in the system, but had actually made it into the CityWorks inventory. So the process is you buy up front, you put it in enterprise, so that has been added to the books. If no one now takes that extra data entry step of putting it into CityWorks, it's not showing on the books as inventory. So the CityWorks inventory would look less than what the enterprise number's showing. And that's what alerted us to start looking in that area, because that's in theory where you'd find the biggest dollars if there is a discrepancy. So it's a process that we're working through.
So the barcode reader or whatever gonna leave it?
Barcode's not gonna fix that. You're gonna have to fix that before you can even do barcode. You've gotta know what you have and
Right,
where it
exactly,
is.
exactly. So
Mhm.
basically, it's our personnel anyhow that'll be doing it.
Yes, yes, but the actual configuration of making it work with our existing CityWorks software, and then that potential of doing an API connection to Enterprise, what that'll
Save
do,
us time
it'll
and-
save us some of the data
I
entry
understand
steps and potentials to make errors and not enter or enter the incorrect information.
And I will say, CityWorks has also done an API to work with Enterprise before too. We're not asking them to do anything they haven't already done.
Oh, yes, Yes.
Well,
So when we went to
understand
CityWorks conference, I mean, there's several people that are using CityWorks for storeroom. I actually came from an organization that used CityWorks for storeroom, and it was effective. So I don't think there's going to be any problem with the barcodes working or the plugins
Well,
not
I'm not worried
functioning.
about that. I'm thinking about, somebody gotta make the inventory, gotta go and actually put the barcode on the equipment.
Yes.
So we can read it and make sure we
Yes.
get it in the system. You know, so that's what, and as you do the inventory, we're gonna find out exactly what we thought we had and what we actually do have.
Yes,
And it's gonna be from that point on to establish our baseline, this is what we got
right.
versus what we thought we had.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, that's one of the goals of this is, you know, it'll help streamline the process. It'll also, too, you know, help that staff be more responsive as people are coming in and looking for parts. You know, being able to locate them quicker instead of having to write out a ticket, they can just scan it, give it to them, and be on the go.
Right.
One of the other things that we've talked about operationally doing is doing a pick process in the evening. So I know what the next day's work orders are. We would go ahead and pick parts for those, have bins or, you know, things where we could assemble
You
those.
could be on a lot, lady.
Well, like I said, this is why I'm asking 6 to 9 months and for some money to do it.
So are you asking for personnel at some point too, or is that?
We haven't determined that. At this point, we think we can do it with our existing personnel.
I personally,
Which includes whom?
So we
Warehouse
have,
workers?
we have 2 inventory techs,
Okay.
another admin, and then an admin for water distribution that'll also be responsible for inventory, as well as myself and our procurement coordinator. So everybody can take pieces of this to make this transition, but it is going to be an implementation.
So you're gonna be in charge of all that since inventory management? That's what.
I believe
that's
so,
the question
unless
I'm
I'm
asking.
directed otherwise.
That's correct. But you're here, but they're there.
And I go there every day now.
Okay.
Not all day,
Span
but parts of the day.
Span of control now, all right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I go there and I go to St. Simon's, so. And we have 2 different situations in those storerooms. The warehouse and water distribution, it's only used by one operational group, and it's a much smaller group. And in their situation, they actually have the supervisor, and the way they maintain access is everything sort of goes through the supervisor or the assistant supervisor.
Right.
So less items, less people involved. Back to your span of control, it's pretty tight.
Sure.
Academy Creek, you've got people coming from multiple divisions, more personnel, a bigger space,
Well, I think it'd be
probably
I
double
think
the
it'd be
items.
managed. I really think you can do it, especially you putting it, getting it electronically, putting that with digital. I think that it could be easily done.
Right, and one of the things too is we've identified that the internal controls on the inventory management process, we probably need to add some additional things in our procedures, just some, you know, cross checks, and I'm sure our auditors are gonna help us find some things and maybe give us some suggestions with that. They come at the end of every fiscal year, so on June 30th, I accompanied the auditor to both fiscal locations, and we did some sample counts. We had a couple of discrepancies. I'll go ahead and let's, you know, not that be the smoking gun in the room. There's some things, and that's part of why we're trying to take the initiative to tighten some of these things in the warehouses up.
Okay, well, I'd like to know, after you finish your report, find out what we supposed to have, what we don't have, what those discrepancies are. So informally, you can.
Right, and so that's one of the things, one of the reasons also too, and Mr. John can help me with this, when we talked about this, part of why we actually wanted to establish this as a project too, is we wanted to get it on the monthly project report. So it would have a scheduled time that we were updating you, it would have a defined budget, and the scope of it wouldn't creep into, you know, 15 other things beyond this paper unless somebody came back in here and talked to you about it. So this one kind of is the mock run of sort of how we want to do project initiation going forward. And I probably should have said all that up front. I'm so sorry. So that's why we had went through the details of this and really tried to include everything we thought would help improve warehouse and inventory management operations. So for us, the way we would manage this as a project is a little more regimented than, like you said, if we're taking it onesie twosies out of an operational budget that already I don't have. So this kind of keeps it in one bucket of money as far as the accounting. It'll have a 3-digit code, and then we'll actually be able to see where we're off. You know, maybe the shelving cost a lot more, or that sort of thing. So that was the idea of why we were bundling it all as a project. One, to kind of upgrade the facility for the short term, to Mr. Turnipseed's point, because eventually that building, I think if we do a major renovation, will be affected. But for right now, it's got to be fixed up a little bit for us to, in my opinion, manage the inventory the way we need to and lock it down and be able to move it around.
And I definitely understand and appreciate that methodology, but I personally, I feel like these onesie, twosie things should come out of our operations, especially if we're gonna get them
Yes.
directly back from operations.
Yes.
And, the 27.5 and the 16, those actual direct software and maybe some contingency associated with it for some small bins and shelving and stuff, a small amount, be applied to that. But, I mean, just doing some paper napkin math, it's 43,000 for the two. You asked for 5% contingency, that was over the overall project, but, rounding up, now it's right in the number of, 7,000 or so puts us in that $50,000 range versus 110. I mean, I just personally feel all these 3,500 here for safety improvements and 2,000 there and 1,000 here, that should be out of our operational expenses.
I think so too, and as that Andrew said, we can get those transferred from Kurt's budget to internally, so that shouldn't be a problem.
And ultimately, it's a net over the first month might be over, but it's a net at the end of the year because we're going to pick all that back up from operations.
Right. So.
And
What could be done would be to make this the full budget of the project itself, and then as we determine what those onesies and twosies costs are, that should come out of the operating budget, we can make transfer, budget transfer.
Well, you can do the budgeting time any way you want, but for us, really, we want to make sure this capital project thing, and that is about $50,000 for the software program. However you set it up.
That's what I'm saying, is we could set up the project for the cost of this, and then operations would reimburse the project.
That's too messy, sir. That's a little too.
Okay,
That's just my.
let's kind of limit what we're gonna approve,
Well,
just the capital portion.
okay, so if
Right.
all, and where I think this is headed is you guys are only intending to approve the barcode section.
Yes.
So I'm gonna come back to you with a revised number of that once I have this
Well,
placed.
it's right here. I mean, you got it in the
No,
thing.
no, no, this is a budgetary
Oh,
proposal.
okay.
So
I
if
got
you read the memo that I was getting to that part of it, it's only a budgetary, and that's why I figured within the overall project, if we needed to take, some contingency or whatever. So before the barcode portion of this gets approved, I actually want to get the final number once we have all of the physical control things put into place, because I could have overestimated or I could have underestimated what we need, because this was
Okay.
a budget
So
number.
now, at this point, you're not asking us to approve anything.
No, it sounds like no. I think they've solved my problem, at least for getting the facility fixed, and I'll come back at a later date for the barcode part of this once we have that accomplished, if I'm understanding that right.
Any other discussion or comment? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Burrows, on reducing boil water advisories. I got something to say here. Sometimes we forget what kind of organization we are. We sometimes think of ourselves as a water and sewer company or activity, but really we're a service organization. We have customers, and we need to meet customer demands and issues. And the boil water alerts are not helping us. They're necessary and they're required by law, as I think Mr. Burrow is going to explain to us. But at the same time, we need to start holding people accountable that create a situation where a boiled water alert occurs. And so this is why I asked for this presentation.
Thank you.
Sure, be happy to go into that, and I think we're gonna hit on what you're talking about here. If you want me to, if you have any more questions, we'll be happy to cover those. So instead of, it's not exactly in the format you're used to seeing, instead of going the who, what, when, where, why, we're getting that out of order a little bit, but that's basically what we're gonna do on the agenda today on how these things happen. So why do we have boil water advisories? Commissioner Stevens asked this morning if we could provide a copy of the actual ordinance or regulation from the state of Georgia as to why these things exist. That is provided in your packet for you. that I will be happy to go through if we need to. But in a nutshell, there are 3 ways in which you could have a boil water advisory as required by state regulatory authority. You can either lose system pressure to a level below 20 psi. Your newly constructed systems, if you add something to your new system or to your system, or you go and put a new system in that is not connected to anything, it has to be pre-chlorinated. And until the results of that chlorine test come back, you have to have a boil water advisory. On a currently existing system, if you get a residual chlorine number lower than 0.2 parts per million, you also have to put in a boil water advisory. So there's 3 particular ways. For our purposes, the ones we're most concerned with are the loss of pressure and the loss of residual chlorine. And we'll see from some data I have later, none of the boil water advisories we've put out have been due to a lack of chlorine. It's been because of a loss of system pressure. Okay, so we've only had one of these options come into play. But from the Georgia EPD, a boil water advisory is defined as a precautionary notice to users of public drinking water to disinfect water that they may ingest due to the water of unknown quality in the distribution system. And I put that up there and read that out word for word because when we have a boil water advisory, we are not saying that there's something wrong with the water. What we are saying is we can't with 100% certainty verify the quality of that water. In all likelihood, the chances of someone becoming ill from ingesting the water is very slim. But without data that proves that, we can't say that with 100% certainty, so we're required to issue the boil water advisory. So, and when we do boil water advisories, if you've seen the ones we put out, it affects neighborhoods and smaller areas. We don't put one out for the entire system. Only the affected areas come into play. So, one of the things that I think somewhat prompted this discussion to happen is there is a perceived increase in the amount of boil water advisories we've been putting out there. Well, prior to Hurricane Matthew, Joint Water and Sewer never issued a boil water advisory. So the perceived increase is because we are actually doing what we're supposed to do now. We went from not issuing any boil water advisories to going to the letter of the law. And when that happens, you're going to see an increase in what goes out there. We are trying to follow the law as closely as we can, and because of that, you're seeing a lot of boil water advisories. And we'll get to this in a second, but if you look at 2017, basically we started really putting out boil water. There was a boil water advisory in 2016 for Hurricane Matthew. After that, the next boil water advisories we put out were in March of 2017. So for 10 months of 2017, we put out 60 boil water advisories.
So 6 a month.
6 a month. I won't say that it works out to that quite exact, but it does do that. Now, this year, we're 7 months into the year, and we've had 43 boil water advisories, which works out pretty close to 6 a month. So there isn't necessarily an increase in boil water advisories as much as we're actually doing it correctly. We've been doing it for the full year, so it seems like we got a whole lot more. So, and that is through a couple of days ago, so that number may, if you go count them back, there may be one more on that. That's just through a couple of days ago when I did the presentation. So the where of this, are we only having these problems in one area, or is it system-wide? If we're having problems in one area, then we go attack that area. The chart on the right, and I apologize, I got this backwards. The chart on the right shows what we did in 2017, the 60 of them, and in the gray area shows that 36 of those 60 come on the mainland and 24 on the island. So they're pretty well spread out. On the left, so far this year, it's almost 50-50. The mainland does see a little bit more than the island, but remember that the mainland has more miles of pipe. Therefore, you should have more on the larger distribution system. So, when do they happen? You want to look at when can you notice patterns, or is there a pattern? Is there something that we're doing, or is it the system that is being overloaded at certain points of the year that are causing this to happen? You'll notice that this chart starts in January of 2017 on the far left, and there's nothing in January and February, like I said. So we started in March. What I think this chart shows is you've got a lot of variety in here. You see the major spike in January. If you recall, we had a winter storm in January that this area is not traditionally used to seeing. Nationwide, more boil water advisories are put out in the winter simply due to the freeze-thaw cycle of the ground. As the ground shrinks and expands for the freeze-thaw cycle, the pipes move and they break. So we had 15 in January, and I don't quote me on this number, but I think 9 of them were the week of the freeze. So from that regard, that's why you see that spike there. We don't typically deal with that, so ours most likely are going to fall all throughout the year in a fairly even pattern as long as we don't get freezing temperatures. So one of the things I'll also point to is we have a lot of construction going on in this community that we do not have control over necessarily. They're out there doing their jobs, we inspect them, but they're out there digging on the ground and such of that. If our water system is impacted, we have to issue a boil water advisory even if a private citizen has caused a problem with our system. So if you look at these numbers in 2017, over 50% of those boil water notices were caused by a private citizen, or we lumped them all together as contractors. I won't say that every one of them was a contractor. There could be a situation where a homeowner goes out to dig a mailbox and hits the line, and we have to shut the system off because they broke the line in half. That technically isn't a contractor, but I'll say those are lumped together in that contractor number. This year you'll see it's almost 50-50 with a slight leaning towards the contractor side. So when you hear those numbers that we're putting out 6 boil water notices a month for stuff that is our responsibility, they're all our responsibility. For stuff that is because of issues that we are facing, it's about 3 a month. So what causes all of our boil water advisories? If you,
I have a question.
yes, sir.
On the ones that you have for JWSC, is that a planned outage, or is that an unplanned line break?
Well, if we're going to go through that right now.
All right.
So this is just the numbers on the joint water and sewer calls. This has nothing to do with the,
Okay.
my apologies, this has everything in there, but we'll go to another section. What I'll say here is, if you break down those 60 in 2017, you'll notice that 24 of them are due to material failures. That's from material fatigue, not from somebody hitting the line. 25 of them, or just about half of them, are because somebody damaged the line by digging through it. That could be us, that could be a contractor. Private systems, again, if we have a private system that is hooked onto our system at all, or if they're installing a private system for a development and then we have to chlorinate that, we do have to put out a boil water notice for that. That was 5 of them. And then I lumped the rest of them together as an other. That might be a tree root growing through something. That might be in 2017, one of the ones we put out is there was at one point a concern of some cross-contamination issues. So we put out a boil water advisory while we were investigating. In 2018, again, materials and damage to the lines are the biggest causes. With this year so far, the answer to that question mostly being material fatigue and not damage to the line. So on the material failures, I looked at the data on material failures we've had in the last 2 years to see if it's a particular type of pipe or a particular size of pipe which is giving us the biggest issues. The overwhelming majority of our material failures have occurred on PVC pipe, which makes a certain amount of sense because the overwhelming majority of our distribution system is PVC pipe. You will see a smaller portion of that is showing up on galvanized pipe, which is usually small diameter service lines that are very old, and galvanized pipe is also very fragile if you're anywhere near it. The other 3 types that we've had the failure on are ductile pipe, ductile iron pipe, cast iron pipe, and transite pipe. You'll notice on a lot of the boil water advisories we've had that the word transite comes up sometimes. Most of the time when you have a failure on transite pipe, it's because of damage to the pipe from digging. Transite does not like being jiggled at all. So when you hit it with a bucket on accident, it breaks. We have to put out a boil water advisory. It's not because the pipe is failing. So then the pipe diameter, you'll notice on this graph, that almost half of our pipe failures that are causing these are on 2-inch pipes, which are service connections, very small lines. The big lines are not traditionally what is breaking. which also allows us to, the smaller diameter pipes cause smaller boil water advisories because they feed less people. But just because a 2-inch pipe happens to be at the end of a cul-de-sac, that does not mean that the boil water advisory only affects the cul-de-sac, because we have to be able to go back and valve that off somewhere. We may impact people that are not directly fed, but fed by a 6 or 8 inch line that the 2-inch tees off of, because we have to get back to where we can valve it off.
Are there not live tap options for those times? I mean,
Yes,
can you
sir.
not live install a valve on a 2-inch line to keep from having to interrupt the service?
You
of a
can
6-inch
live
line?
install a valve to do that. There would be naturally a cost associated with going and throwing a lot of valves out in the system every time this happens. But there are options. I'm actually going to talk about some things we
I
can
mean,
do.
definitely not on a 6 or 14 or something. I just meant like on a, if a
We-
2-inch line, you're going to have to shut an 8-inch line off to repair a 2-inch line. It seems like you'd almost just throw a valve in, close it, repair it, and then open the valve, leave it in the open position, bury it, and forget about it, forget it's even there.
We can certainly look into that. And we do have a tapping machine that we can tap large diameter pipe. I don't know I can't say that I know the success rate on tapping 2-inch pipe on that. But you can hot tap water lines. We do, and our water distribution staff does a fantastic job of actually working on a lot of lines that are hot. And
Right.
for those that are not familiar, hot means it's got water running through it. So we have more main breaks and pipe failures by a large number than we have actual boil water advisories, because our staff does a very good job of working on especially small diameter lines under pressure. So a 2-inch line, to your point, Commissioner Stevens, there may be a way we can valve this off even in the second situation I'm going to talk about. But a 2-inch line that is cracked, we're not going to shut the water off to do that. We're just going to put a band around it while it's hot. A 2-inch line that somebody took a post hole diggers and absolutely cut in two, you can't really band that. You got to replace. So to your point, we can look at doing something like that. We'd still have a boil water advisory for, say, in the situation before, the cul-de-sac, but it might not be for the 10 houses on the T in front of the cul-de-sac.
And I just think that, there's some level of, what's the word, decision-making, empowerment on the level of the staff in those situations. Because to your point, I mean, when we were talking about it the other day, just kind of offline, because we had one affect the hospital, and I just called to inquire about the process and how it worked. You mentioned that if it affects a restaurant, they actually are out of business for 2 full days. So if we have an opportunity to save, for us put a $100 valve in and save a restaurant 2 days of business, like the chairman said earlier, we're in the customer service business ultimately.
What I'll say is I gave you slightly incorrect information on that. The 2-day notices only apply to medical facilities. The rest of the community has a 1-day notice. So a restaurant may only be shut down for 1 day.
Okay.
But we're going to go over some changes we're making to shrink that down even from the 1 day as best we can. I'm not going to say we're going to have it done in 15 minutes, but we can shrink that 1 day down a little bit and help some folks out. But the 2-day is for, out of an extreme abundance of caution, for medical facilities and people that really depend on, if something gets in the water, it may cause some serious issues for folks. So, like I was just talking about, our current testing protocols for E. coli, which is what we're sampling for in these scenarios. We sample for chlorine and E. coli. You can get a real-time chlorine sample very quickly. We have that number immediately. As soon as service is restored, we can have a chlorine number for that, and the residual's only got to be 0.2. It's not difficult to get that much chlorine in the water. What's taking a while right now is the sample for E. coli takes 22 to 24 hours to get results on. Basically, the way that's done is similar to what the medical profession does for testing of bacteria. Basically, you put the material on a type of substrate that allows it to grow, and then you count what grows on the material. So the E. coli testing does take time just to allow the growth to occur. So there are methods, and it's based off of the math that's done afterwards where we can get that down. While I was doing this presentation, Donnie Bankston, our water production superintendent who does the lab work on this sort of stuff, I got him to research the EPA-approved testing methods for E. coli. EPA puts out approved testing methods for every parameter you have to test for. You have to use one of their methods. We are switching for a relatively low-cost option to get that to an 18-hour test. I mean, 18 versus 24 may not be a huge improvement, but 6 hours is 6 hours if we can get that result back. To what we have found thus far, that appears to be, from an EPA-approved method, the best way of going about this. There are non-EPA approved methods that can be less than 18, but we can't actually submit those results to EPD to prove that we don't have problems with the water if it's not an EPA approved method. So it's sort of, until those other methods get approved through the EPA process, which if you've ever dealt with that, is not a 2-week process to get done by any stretch. The 18 appears to be the best case scenario for what we're going to do. This is going to increase our sampling cost minimally. It's about $100 extra a case. We order between 5 to 10 cases a year. So we're talking very small dollars, but there will be a small increase by switching to the 18-hour test versus the 24-hour test. So this second bullet point says we're researching and we'll determine if it's cost effective. We researched, it is cost effective, we're going to the 18-hour test. And for those medical facility outages that were 2 days, now they're 36 hours potentially instead of 48 hours. So
you still have to do 2 rounds of it?
Well, let me go through that. For the medical facilities, we do 2 rounds. We do 2 rounds for every one of them. We do a second, but we don't, for the restaurants and the homeowners, we don't hold the boil water advisory for 2 days. We just do it for our own.
I don't mean to contradict you, but the Bill Hawthorne has actually only approved us to allow that exemption for single homeowners. Restaurants, any facility that sells water, daycares and schools have to have 2 days.
Okay. Then I apologize for.
So walk me through that again, or walk us through it, but.
It's 2 days to get, you have to get 2 samples.
I mean, from the second it breaks. What
2
happens?
days, second it breaks, you repair the line, you get pressure back to it.
Okay, that starts hour 0.
That starts hour 0. It's then 2 samples through it for 2 days. So for 48 hours later, assuming there's no growth or anything on the plates, we're open for business. There's no boil water advisory at that point.
I don't mean to be thick-headed, I'm just trying to understand. So it breaks, you immediately take a sample.
No.
Well, I mean, once you get it repaired.
Once you get it repaired.
You immediately take a sample. You wait 18 hours now instead of 24.
Take another sample.
And then you get that result and it says clean. You immediately take another example. That starts the clock over, and you wait another 18 hours. That's how you get to 36.
Yes.
And at the end of 36, you pick up the phone and call and say it's clear. Or not pick up the
That's
phone.
correct.
You go through the process.
That is
and
correct.
You mentioned that doesn't apply to restaurants. The 36 doesn't, or the 40?
The 36, according to Jay, and he probably is correct on this. I thought that was the way. Somebody told me this morning.
I'll pass out the approved best practices. This is what EPD, state of Georgia, has approved this methodology. Because the standard is vague, and I think we discussed that via emails, that the state is reluctant to say this is exactly how you need to do this. I wish they would, because then it would be a lot less confusing.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Jay for the assist on this.
Well, in fact, I'm more involved on a daily basis, but because it involves operations primarily, I'm just a conduit for the information. Andrew's doing a great job, and I'll sit down and shut up.
Okay, so we are reducing that for to the information just presented. The residential may be down to 18 hours. The service industries may be more 36 than 48. So we are looking at ways to shrink that. That's the first step, and we'll continue to look for those ways to do that.
So just make sure I understand the 30, forget the 24 and the 48, the 1 day and the 2 day. 1 day is residential, 2 days is medical facilities, restaurants, et
Yes.
cetera.
Yeah.
But we're still able to reduce both down from a 24-hour test to an 18-hour
Right,
test.
so it's 1 sample and 2 samples, and now that's less than a day for each sample.
So we say 12 hours.
Right. We reduced the commercial facilities by 12 hours. Okay? So.
Okay, I had something, since we're gonna talk for a second. When was the last time we explained boil water alerts to the public, and how did we do it? Jay?
I produced a video approximately 8 weeks ago and distributed that as an ad via Facebook, posted that to our website. At the point where every boil water advisory is distributed, there's commentary below the map that indicates what a boil water advisory is. There's a link that says, what is a boil water advisory? Clicking that takes you back to our webpage where that video is also embedded. Obviously, we're visual people, so in some cases, it'd be much better to watch a 2-minute video about a boil water advisory than listen to me talk about it or have a paragraph of text. So that 2-minute video has been pretty effective as far as eyeballs seeing that. And
Since you have it on Facebook, have you taken the number of hits?
I could certainly look, yes, sir.
Okay, I guess where I'm going with this, we need to continue to address the issue with the customers so that they understand why we have to do it, which is key, and what's causing it.
Sure.
And in looking at your statistics, a lot of it is private contractor type people that, I don't know whether they got their, got the line marking that we do, but we need to say that that's available, but people still run into our lines.
Yes, sir. And on that note, we'll start at the bottom of this slide here. Considering that over half of our boil water advisories are caused by private entities, the way that we feel we can best approach that is to educate our contractors on what a located line actually means. There's 2 ways to do that. Either we can do that, but we were recently approached approximately a month ago. Georgia 811 came in and did a training for us. And at that time, they wanted to see if we wanted to initiate quarterly meetings held here by Georgia 811. We would sponsor that for them to come in and talk with us and anybody else that wants to attend those. That may be, I think that's something staff would be very for, to have them come in once a quarter. We could invite our local contractors, our neighboring utilities. The training that we had here, we had members from the city of Brunswick-Glynn County, GDOT. We had a good group. It allows us an opportunity for everybody to come, and we had private engineers there. It allows us to come together and talk about the problems that we're having in a sort of non-threatening situation. It's, here's what I'm seeing from my perspective. Why is this not working for you, so we can work through some of those problems? Because the second bullet point on that lower thing, it would be a line that is located is only located within an 18-inch accuracy. Now, 18 inches sounds like a pretty good bit of space, and why would we have anything in a 18-inch window? But we have, and not just, I don't say we do it, the natural gas companies do it, the telecom people do it. They try to run things in very narrow windows in the edge of right-of-way when there maybe not be an available easement. And you end up with very crowded situations where people are in there digging, where in certain situations, even though it's not technically should be done, we have telecom lines that are within 18 inches of our pipe. And they get the lines located, and they still hit our lines because the line locate was off by the 18 inches, and it's right there by where their line is, and then you scrape down the side of it, and the line breaks. So, and I'll also say that we do have some older parts of our system, specifically the PVC pipe we were talking about earlier. 40 and 50-year-old PVC pipe, unfortunately, in this area was not laid down with tracer wires put on it. And the way those locates work is based off of magnetics, and plastic is not magnetic. So if those old lines don't have tracer wires on them, they will call us for a locate, and we're giving them just 100% our best guess of where it's at, because we have no way of actually putting a metal detector on that line and finding it. So we're looking at our GIS, and we find out the GIS may not be 100% correct because the record drawings we got weren't 100% correct. And then we go back, in these situations, if somebody hits something that we didn't do it, we're going to go back and get a GPS shot on that and update our map for next time. So it's an iterative process. So to what you were saying before, do we know if these contractors are actually getting them located? The vast majority of them are. If you have a situation where we go out there and you've hit our line as a contractor and you have not got the line located, you are getting a bill for our services for coming out there and fixing that for you. If you got the line located, you put forth a good faith effort to make sure you weren't going to hit our lines. And the same thing happens with us. We get lines located and we accidentally dig through telecom lines. It's a two-way street. We're not the only ones getting affected by this. So if we go out there and you haven't done that, you are getting a bill for that. But the vast majority of our contractors are doing what they're supposed to do. They're calling the locates. We have 2 staff members that all they do for us is do water and sewer locates, and they're out getting ahead of those.
So essentially if they called us for a line locate, we did a line locate, they still hit the line, they're given a pass, they have to pay for the repair.
At this point, yes, sir.
So, Andrew, by definition, because we're kind of moving from a 24-hour window to a 36, or to a 18 per day, that's kind of going to put it in off hours. So a 3 p.m. is no longer going to fall at a 3 p.m. the next day. It's going to fall, at a...
Theoretically, yes, sir.
It's going to fall out of hours most of the time. Is our staff 24/7, so when they get that, they can notify people? And the thing I think is important about that is, frankly, I really appreciate y'all looking into this. I mean, because as somebody,
Sure.
As businesses in the community, I think are going to get a lot of positive, and I think we need to get some positive press out of this. But 12 hours might not sound much, but if it falls right, that's one business day.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's, for a restaurant, that's, an evening meal you're able to serve versus not. So 12 hours might not sound like a lot, but I mean, that's whether you are able to serve meals that day or whether we're able to provide medical services that day. So I think this is a big deal. But do we have people who work at night who will receive those results and be able to communicate that?
To that point, usually these boil water advisories affect 3 groups of our staff members. Water distribution is typically the one that is tasked with repairing the leak that has occurred. So they have people on call 24/7 that if a line breaks, they are called, they take care of that break.
I meant more when the results come in.
Right. Now, water production gets called in to do the sampling. And once they get a sample that's required, they are then, by our protocols, let's say that the break happens at 3 o'clock today and 18 hours from now would be tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Or sorry, I did the math wrong on that. Tomorrow morning, whatever. Let's say they're supposed to be back at 11 o'clock to read. They are required to come in if they're on call to read those results at 11 o'clock when they're ready. They come in whatever time they're supposed to be ready. That's just our protocol. They then alert Jay at all hours of the night, who then issues the rescindance of the boil water advisory. So we do 24/7, take samples, read samples, and issue or rescind boil water advisories.
Have the stats on the videos. I cover a lot of ground in 2 minutes, and what I tend to do is everything's a call to action. I'm presenting you with these are the facts that cause the situation. This is how you can respond, and these are the things we would like for you to do right now. So everything tends to steer towards Everbridge, the emergency notification system, because we pay an annual fee for that service, and we have a limited number of subscribers. Glynn County's had their Code Red system for a lot longer, and it was very popular during Hurricane Matthew. They saw a huge spike in subscribers, and then it dropped. In our case, we did get a spike during Hurricane Irma, but we haven't had a huge spike aside from every time I put a video out, I get another 100 or 200 customers that subscribe. But to give you an idea, I started off in April with what causes water main breaks. Once again, saying, yes, that results in a boil water advisory, and this is how you subscribe to get the notification. And then in May, what is our role in emergency management? Once again, steering people towards that communication protocol. How do we communicate in emergency? June 15th. So you can see a cycle. I keep hammering that point home. And then what is a boil water advisory specifically? June 27th. So we have 9,700 views on what causes water main breaks, 7,000 views on our role in emergency management, 17,000 views for how do we communicate in an emergency, and what is a boil water advisory is still running, and we have 14,000 views. So a lot of eyeballs are seeing this. Now, some of those are obviously going to be redundant, but and then just minutes ago, earlier today, I put out one on how a fire hydrant works. Once again, indicating that if there's a problem with the water system, we put out a boil water advisory. Please go subscribe to get the updates. So we're certainly having a positive effect through Facebook and social media, very positive. YouTube, not so much, but I still put those there for people to embed on their own blogs and such, but definitely having a good effect running that through Facebook.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
So-
have we had a newspaper story on it recently?
Yes, sir. The Brunswick News in particular ran a story after we subscribed to the Everbridge service, in particular as a response to the situation we had in Ashentilly January on St. Simon's 2017, where we didn't have any protocol and there was a call for us to go out and do door-dom notices. So a few months later, we did get into the Everbridge system, and since then, that's been very effective at getting the word out. Only about 14 or just short of 1,500 subscribers now. So If anybody in this room hasn't subscribed, please do.
Well, and with that being said, you can sign up for only getting the boil water advisories that affect your district. If you're a mainland resident and you don't want to find out about a boil water advisory that occurs on the island, you don't have to. Me personally, because I want to know when we have them, I get the alerts for every single one of them. And they will send you a text message at 2 o'clock in the morning that says you got a boil water advisory. Now, if that doesn't affect you, that could irritate you just a little bit, but you are being informed of that there's a boil water advisory if you do sign up for those updates. So I've kind of covered the back half of this now, where we're going to work with our local contractors to educate them on the 18-inch deal. Bring in Georgia 811, hopefully, and start doing the quarterly meetings here and make sure we contact our contractors and say, hey, we're having this. We'd love for you to come meet with us on this. But we also, and this is not just for boil water advisories, Todd's group has been working to try to improve the spacing between all the utilities out there. So we have dedicated easements for water and sewer and dedicated easements for dry utilities. That would help out a huge deal. If the only people that had pipes near us were us, we'd have a whole lot less boil water advisories. So we're working through that process. So hopefully as we go forward, we will reduce those with the education and with the and on these projects, making sure that the telecom and natural gas folks are far enough away from our pipe that 18-inch rule isn't going to cause us problems. And water lines are very shallow compared to sewer lines. Sewer lines don't get hit near as often because you got to dig 10 feet down to get to them. Water lines are 3 feet under the ground. So it's a little easier to hit that. 3 feet doesn't sound that shallow, but then you realize some people will put mailboxes in the ground 2 to 3 feet deep on the post and concrete it in. So it's literally, people are hitting these with post hole diggers. Joe Homeowner is doing it. So that's just, it's a system, and because of that, we may have to shut off more people, but per Commissioner Stevens' suggestion, we're going to look at ways to reduce that. So on that, the small diameter lines are clearly giving us the biggest problems, mostly PVC and galvanized lines. The volume of PVC we have out there is going to be highly unlikely we could ever attack all of that. It's just not practical. And in reality, it would not be cost effective to go to a different technology even if we could go to everything. PVC is a good pipe and it is long lasting as long as people don't hit it. Galvanized lines, on the other hand, are in awful shape across the entire country. You can go to any state or national water show and someone will be complaining about galvanized lines, not because of any issues that the customer experiences, but because they break all the time. So one way we can reduce those is to start doing smaller projects to prioritize areas of town where we have galvanized lines and attack those galvanized lines. Replace them probably with PVC lines with tracer wires on them so we can actually locate them. And then, to Commissioner Stevens' point, we're looking for more opportunities to fix these small diameter leaks under pressure. If there's a way we can throttle a valve and maintain, say, 30 PSI pressure compared to 60, and we can work it hot that way, we're looking for ways to do that. I will say that's a training with the staff. Sometimes the staff gets eager and trying their best to get a leak stopped as fast as they can, and they go shut a valve without fully assessing the situation. They're going back to the closest valve they can find to shut it off because we got a leak. So there's going to be some training with staff too. Maybe we're going to lose a little more water, but let's stop for 10 minutes and see if there's a way we can do this without having to put one of these out. So our staff does a fantastic job going after these leaks and trying to get them fixed. And their eagerness sometimes makes them quick to close valves when maybe there's a way to throttle one or work it hot because it wouldn't affect a boil water advisory. Okay. All right. And for that version of my talk, because I got the next item too, is all I have. Any questions for you?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Did you say prior to 2017 we never had any boil water advisories?
The only one we had was 2016 for Hurricane Matthew. That's the only one we've had before then.
And before then, since the JWSC was formed, they never had one?
Prior to city, county, Custer.
Never been done.
Okay.
They've been required since 1974.
Yes, and we just weren't doing them.
Do we know where all our valves are located?
Do we know where all of our valves are located? Absolutely not. We know where a lot of them are located, and our water distribution staff are going out on a daily basis, getting tremble shots on these valves to load them into GIS. So no, sir, we do not, but that is an active project we are
Sometimes we don't
going
even know
over.
if they're open or closed.
Do they have access on their smartphone to tell them where the valves might be, though,
Yes,
if
sir.
we do know where they are?
Todd's group
Out in
has
the
created
field.
a great app where we can pull up on our phone the water GIS or the sewer GIS, and it's in the field, we can find that. In fact, I use that more often than the actual GIS because it's faster. So it's a great setup we have.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of probably a lengthy executive session meeting, I didn't know there was opportunity for the rest of the meeting to maybe consolidate some things or compress them. I know I've got to, unfortunately, I'm bound to a daycare schedule today because my
I'm
wife's
aware
out of
of that,
town. And I'm sure Commissioner Browning's going to be. I didn't know if there's anything we can move to defer or move or just ask for.
The odor control could wait.
I mean, we can wait on odor control, or I can give you a 5-minute on odor control.
I think we wait.
I think we can probably wait on the water bills. I had a lengthy discussion on water bills, and there are a lot of technical issues with trying to achieve a simpler water bill. But overall, I took my own water bill, and if I took what I used in June, which was under the old system, and put it in the new process, I would have had a $10 reduction in my water bill from June. So I'm gonna ask the commission to recalculate my whole, no, I'm teasing. And if I took my first month, and under this one, I had a much higher usage, 2,000 gallons, and I still had a savings from the way we calculated it prior. And that is apparently across the board. We've had some complaints on Facebook about it, but many of those people had other issues, such as they said their bill was doubled, but they failed to discount the fact that they didn't pay their bill the month before.
Builds up quick with those fees.
Was there an option to either defer some of this stuff or either move the executive session to earlier in the meeting and then come back in here, maybe at least people?
I think we're gonna eat up the rest of the day I'd like to get to the executive session.
I would as well.
And I'm gonna allow the executive director to talk about LS 4003 upgrades and engineering selection process. And if you would include that in your executive director's update.
Go ahead and cover the executive director's update as well.
Yeah. And then the status of capital projects, you have that. Commissioners, please review that and contact Todd if you have any questions. All right, Mr. Junkin?
Mr. Chairman, I went back and after the last discussion about the 4003 engineering selection, the discussion went through, the staff went through the process that had been outlined in the RFP, made a selection, and in the discussions that were in our recommendations and discussions of our recommendation for the engineer selected, there was a great deal of talk about or discussion about the pricing of some of the other folks and the relative capabilities and then the possible alternative design. In talking to follow up after the meeting, I went and spoke with the selected engineer and asked them to sharpen their pencils. They sharpened their pencils and moved their price from I think it's $292 down, or $286 down to $240. The firm that was getting the attention in the previous meeting was at $192. I couldn't get the selected engineering firm below the below the $240. I think that's a reasonable price for the work. I don't think it's unreasonable. I will say this, that that's my recommendation at this point. If we choose not to go with that recommendation, and that's strictly the commission's choice. I have an alternative recommendation. And I can go through that real quickly. My alternative recommendation is, if we're not happy with that we throw out all bids, we reissue the RFP, we change the criteria to include, and I've gone ahead and in advance reached out to get some input from some of the commission members, and reissue the RFP with the new criteria and run through the process again with a strictly defined upgrades project to lift station 4003 with strictly defined services during construction. So really all we're going to be comparing, if everybody is good, is capable, is their price, is what it sounds like it'll cook down to in my mind. No alternatives will be offered or allowed. We're going to strictly look at what we want done on lift station 4003. No experiments, no, what is it we want? We have a pretty good understanding of those needs. The question has come about, what is the capacity we want the station to be able to provide? And looking at it, staff has come back with 2,250 gallons per minute capacity. So we've got the project defined. We can go with the selected engineer, or I say throw it all out, and just to keep us out of any kind of sticky situations that might arise as a result of circumventing the process.
Commissioners?
Well, I don't think it'll get us into any sticky situation. It's still our selection, whatever we decide to do. Whether your options, really appreciate your options you're giving us, but still, it's our decision to make one way or the other.
I agree.
So.
Any other commissioner comments?
I can quickly hand out the criteria if anybody, if the commission's interested.
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm concerned we've already gotten prices, and if everybody knows the prices out there, it's really not fair to anybody to submit again, if it's gonna be the same proposal.
We're gonna define it very exactly, so they'll have to compete. They won't know exactly what the other guys are gonna do this time, I would say.
So are we here to make a decision today? Or what, or just information?
No, I was hoping to get a decision so that staff could, if we're directed to reissue the RFP, I'm ready to turn staff loose and get this going. If we're ready to, contract, tell us what we want to do there and we'll get that going.
Mr. Chairman, what you want?
What I want, I don't know.
Can we do a vote with it being on the agenda?
No, we would have to,
Oh,
if
yeah.
y'all wanna, if you just want to rebid the project,
Consensus?
I
Well,
think
I can come back
that
next time.
doesn't really need a motion, but if you want to vote on the award, then we would need to, amend the agenda.
Why?
Because it's only under discussion, not
Yeah.
approval.
Yeah.
My mistake.
But we deferred our action last time, right?
We'd have to add it to the.
We'd still have
agenda.
to
Oh, okay. All right.
amend the agenda, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's not.
You
that-
don't want to keep us out of jail. I concede.
The one thing on is, if we do they got a different upgrade engineer evaluation selection criteria, and I think he does have something in here about points for a local office and qualified staff within a certain distance, and also some numbers in there, something for price. So that would be a consideration too, to let the people know that.
Well, I think that needs to be in our going forward, not necessarily with this one. It could be something that we incorporate our future RFPs or whatever like that. But so we need to decide one way or the other. Are we gonna, as the director said about, do we want to throw it out and do it again? Or do we want to wait until we make a decision at our next meeting?
I guess where I'm at with this criteria, to redo it.
Yeah,
That's up to you.
if we throw it out and rebid,
Or reissue the
or
RFP.
are we going to grade the?
Yes, we'll go through a similar process. The matrix will be expanded by the items we've added for
What
cost.
we're
and-
gonna end up with then is another situation where we have prices and we have y'all's technical evaluation.
No, that's
No,
not,
he's gonna make price-
I've added price as one of the criteria.
Is a consideration.
So what?
Price is a consideration.
Price is a consideration.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's,
Oh, okay, so that's the difference. The first time then price wasn't a consideration.
it was
That's
not, but
correct.
that was what Commissioner Terpsey was saying. We've added price and location to the,
I personally think we've got we got enough information, we've got a new recommendation with a lower cost. We can compare that against the other people's costs and make a decision when it's on the, on the agenda to do so. I hate to throw it out and start over. I think there's time, I think there's staff resources, it's money, it's everything.
I'm with you on that. It's time to make a decision.
Right.
So we have to wait until our next
but-
meeting to make a decision, right?
Unless we amend the agenda.
Okay, well, that too.
But, you're gonna have to tell us
it
again
can
what
wait
the,
until next
what's
meeting.
what's the revised pricing now?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was 240,000 versus their original, I think it was 282 for the selected
Oh,
engineering firm.
no,
The recommended.
the low, I think the commission wants to approve the low bidder,
Not necessarily the low bidder, but one of the lower bidders.
one of the lower bidders.
One of the lower bidders.
The numbers
Understand.
were, Thomas and Dunn was 198, the new Constantine proposal was 240, and Hussey Gay Bell's 252.
So I don't know how you make that, I don't know how, I make a decision as to which one to pick.
You don't know how you do that?
Well, if you do it just straight on price, yeah.
But we can't do that today, is I guess what I'm hearing is, because it's not on the agenda, right?
No,
Unless
you
we
can
amend the
amend the
agenda.
agenda.
Oh, you can still amend the agenda. I thought you meant you had the agenda before the meeting started.
No,
It can wait
Oh,
in light of the time considerations you guys have for executive session.
why don't you bring it back on the 16th?
Will do.
Yeah.
Is that
and,
okay?
And
That's what I was thinking.
Give us a little,
Right on.
status of the proposals that we already have.
Okay,
Even if it's
Just
a
the
revised
summary.
proposal. What their valuation score was and their price.
we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, do you have anything else for executive session? I mean, for,
I'm sorry, the only other thing I had, I've got several items, but I'm not gonna, most of the stuff I can probably put in an email and send it out to you all, but I guess the one thing I did do, kind of the request of Commissioner Stevens, sometimes staff, we hear a lot of requests for various information or activities to be pursued and investigated. I think a lot of times staff is working on things, we are reacting to them. It's not always apparent because we don't come back and give you frequent updates on all these many things, because there's a lot of things that get requested sometimes in the meetings. But what we've decided to do is, me and the senior staff that's here are taking notes. We're trying to capture between this group, anything and everything that the commissioners request in the way of follow-up actions or information, those kind of things. To that end, we've got basically a hot wash list that we're going to be tracking each and every one of those requests. And today I brought a current summary of the last meeting, and I'll just pass it around for, and I didn't put a commissioner's name by the request. If you ask for that, well, there it is. But it's information for all the commissioners.
okay? So it's for
And
us
we'll
to
bring that to each
take home and
commission
read.
meeting.
Okay.
I think we need another one.
I added one earlier.
Oh, no, I ain't talking about that.
Is there another one?
Oh, yeah, I've got another. I thought I passed around 10 of them.
Ah,
You got it? We're good, thank you.
yeah.
I've got the
Okay.
digital. Thank you, though.
I just have a couple of comments. We need to be more customer oriented. And the things that we do have to be, we have to look at it from the eyes of the customer all the time. Next, I've been sitting on this commission for 6 years now, and they have been changed every year almost with who the commissioners were. And every commission takes time to gel as a team. And there's a kind of a problem that happens to the staff during our gelling process. But it's like any team, until we actually, as a team, gel with how we're gonna function and do things and what our various criteria for making decisions are, it really kind of creates problems for the staff. I think that this commission has now gelled. And I think that we'll have a very, very good final 5 to 6 months that this team is together. And depending on the changes that occur come January, there should be a core number of people that'll still be here to keep the team going. And that's just my own assessment of where we are today as a commission and as a team. We are a team, we make decisions together, and we have to allow for each individual to express how they feel and their opinion and what their experience that they bring to this table is in making those decisions. So that's kind of what I wanted to say to all the commissioners. I am very proud of this commission and the members of it. So thank you very much. We need to go into executive session. So there is a potential for a vote to come out of that. So could I have a motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we resign.
Have we what?
I got my tongue tied. I'll make a motion that we go into executive session.
I second.
For
All those in
personnel,
favor? Sir?
for personnel and litigation.
Personnel and litigation, okay. I got a
Second.
second?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. We're in executive session in 5 minutes.
can do it.
It may bounce all the way up to, heaven or whatever, but.
That was left on a seat
it will
back there, and we
bounce.
just thought maybe you had something to
Guarantee
do with
that.
that and let her, rather than hanging out. Well, consider it public information, public education for you, helping you learn more about our system.
Hey Charlie, those things were left back there in the chair, the map and those packets. I was guessing that your guys.
Oh, they let us out. They mustn't think very highly of us. They let us out. Oh, man, I can't believe it. Almost 6 o'clock. Last night. I had a meeting all last night. I'm tired.
I make a motion, we come out of executive session, but I'm waiting on the.
Well.
You ain't got enough people to make a motion.
I know, that's what I'm saying, I'm waiting on the rest of them.
We need one other person.
We don't have a chairman.
Need 2 more? Okay.
So we can't come out?
Not yet. I don't know what's going on.
Where's Steve?
One more person.
Bathroom, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting question,
Yes, he did,
Charlie.
yeah.
What happens if executive session?
Have a motion to come out of executive session.
I've already made a motion, we come out of executive session.
Second?
Yes, second.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.